Now, as we define or change our models, we have to create migrations. These migrations are used to keep our database schema in sync with our Prisma schema. Let's see them in action. So here in the terminal, we run npx prisma migrate dev. If you're using a relational database like MySQL or Postgres, you run this command. If you use Mongo, which is a NoSQL database, you run npx prisma db push. So let's run npx prisma migrate dev. Here we need to provide a name for this migration. We can say this is the initial migration. Let's see what happened here. So this command created a migrations folder. In this folder, we have another folder for our first migration, which is called initial. Just before that, we have a date timestamp. This way we can see all migrations in order. So let's see where this folder is. It is here in the Prisma folder. We have migrations. Here's our first migration. In this folder, we have a SQL file. And this file has instructions for creating a database table called user with these columns. Now, if you're not familiar with SQL, that's totally fine. I have a comprehensive course on this topic if you want to learn. But basically in this file, we have instructions for creating a table with this name and these columns. Now, the type of these columns is based on the user model that we defined in our schema. For example, ID is an integer, email is a varchar with the length of 191. That varchar means variable character. Varchar in MySQL is like a string. Now, the type of these columns will vary depending on the provider we use. For example, if we use a Postgres database, you will see that the type of these columns will be different, okay? So when we run prisma migrate dev, Prisma CLI creates a migration and applies it to our database. So now if you go to our database, we'll see a table called user. In this lesson, I'm going to use data grep to connect to my database. So here we add a new data source, MySQL. On this page, we set the user to root and password, and the database to next app or whatever we use. Currently, I'm missing driver files. Unfortunately, that is not visible in my recording window, but down here, there is a link saying download missing driver files. If you are using data grep, the first time you have to click download to download these driver files. And if you use MySQL Workbench, you're not going to see this error. Now down here, we have a link called test connection. All right, connection is successful. So let's connect to my database. Lovely. So here's the next app database. In this database, we have two tables. Prisma migrations, which is prefixed by an underscore, which means this is private and implementation detail. It's only for Prisma. In this table, we can see all the migrations that have been applied so far. So each migration has an ID and a bunch of other properties. Here we can see the migration name. That is the folder that was created in our project. So over time, as we define or change our models, we create new migrations and apply them to our database. Using this table, Prisma CLI can track what migrations have been applied to this database or not, okay? Now, back to our database. Here we also have the user table with these columns, ID, email, and so on. Now, if we double click on this, we can see the data. Currently, there is no data in this table, but we can easily add a record by clicking on the plus icon. So ID is automatically generated. We're not going to touch that. For email, I'm going to type programmingwithmosh@gmail.com. Let's set the name to Mosh, and we can leave the other columns empty because we supplied default values for them. Now we can click on this icon to submit our changes to the database. Now back to our project. Let's go to our schema file and add a new field in this model. Let's say registered at. We set the type to date time and give it a default value of now. So now is another built-in function in Prisma. So we have made a change here. Now back in the terminal, we can run npx prisma format to reformat our schema. That looks beautiful. Now we should run npx prisma migrate dev one more time to create a new migration. Again, we need to provide a name for this migration. So here we can say add registered at. So by giving meaningful names to our migrations, we can see what kind of changes each migration brings. Okay. Now let's take a look at the new migration file. So here we have a new folder. Again, you can see the timestamp. Here's the folder name, add registered at. Here we have a migration file and a SQL statement for changing the user table to add this column. Now, if you go back to our database and refresh this table, we can see here we have a new column. Beautiful.